A big thank you to all of my listeners. And if you would like to support this transmission even more and boost your trading account, go to trendfollowing.com/now. And without any further delay, on to today's show. This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is the result of trust. Another guest, a friend, an associate, said, Michael, have this person on your podcast. I did about 5 seconds of searching and research and immediately invited her on. My guest today is Zen DeBrucke. Her newest work, Your Inner GPS. Follow your internal guidance to optimal health, happiness, and satisfaction. And you're going to see in this conversation that me having this lady on my show is a great example of what her work is all about. I just went with a gut feel. Let me give a few more details. Just as cars have a GPS that helps us get where we want to go, so do our bodies and souls. Too often we ignore the life directional system we were each born with. My guest today calls that our internal guidance system, IGS. She is all about helping her clients, helping her readers to find that happy, successful, and hopefully stress-free life existence. I think everyone knows by now that my podcast wins. Winner, winner, when it comes to having guests on that have a great mind perspective. Zen DeBrucke adds to this ongoing conversation. Just got off the phone with India, and now you are talking to Saigon.
I love it.
Have you ever been?
I have. I really love Vietnam. It's one of my favorite countries in the world. Crossing the street in Hanoi was one of the most exhilarating things of my life.
and then, but here's the thing. Then once you live in a place like Vietnam, after a while, crossing the street is just simply passé. There's no exhilaration at all. It's just normal.
I know. I was there for 4 months.
Okay, well then you know after a while.
Yeah, but luckily somebody warned me and told me exactly how to do it. So when I got there, I just looked across the street and walked.
I still remember about 3 years ago, a lady grabbed me by the hand and she had heels on and she just strutted out into the middle of like 100 meters of solid wall to wall going every direction and was just pulling me through it, laughing at me the whole time. Like, you scared?
Yep, I remember that. I love Vietnam. How'd you end up there?
Long story short, a few years ago, I was hired to give a speaking tour in Asia for 4 months. And I was in, a dozen countries, 25 cities, 45 presentations. And at the end of it, the 4 months, I was like, I don't want to go back to San Diego. So where did I have the most fun in Asia? So there you go.
There you have it. It's one of the countries in the world I would love to go back to and live.
It's this jewel that's just hidden away and people don't know yet.
Yeah.
You know?
It really, truly is. I had the most incredible time. It's also such a very different culture that has not been westernized like many other cultures. It still holds it, and there was so much fascination for me. I could have just blogged endlessly about the country and been quite happy. And Hoi An was one of my favorites. But I understand your love of it.
What's weird though is like I don't talk to tremendous numbers of Americans that have any perspective other than if they have to get a visa, they think it could be scary and dangerous, so they don't go and they go to tourist Thailand instead.
I like Thailand too, but it's just, to me, it's overpopulated and it's lost its quite a bit of its charm. I had been going there for a very long time, 10 years or so off and on, and over the years I just lost my love of it. I still care about it, but it was nothing compared to Vietnam. We had the best time.
hopefully people are listening because they've heard me talk about it for several years now. So hopefully they're listening to another voice and saying time to go to someplace different. I'm going to jump right in. Brad Rotter. So Brad is a very interesting guy, and I'm going to let you talk in a second. I've met Brad through assorted channels because he touches my world tangentially, and I wrote this book about this famous trader in Chicago, and Brad was his first investor. And so Brad has had a lot of different experiences. But how did you guys come to connect?
I met him when I was the CEO of a tech company in San Francisco. We merged through a couple of different sources, and then he invested in that company. And during the time period that I was the CEO, we were in connection a lot and just fell in love with each other, quite honestly. He's one of my best friends. I have infinite amount of respect for him. In fact, if you noticed, my book was dedicated to him.
I did. I saw that in the acknowledgments.
Him and my husband.
I saw that in the acknowledgments. So that was, he recommended that I chat with you. And so I do trust his vision. He was one of the first people to come on my podcast years back. And, he's one of the few people that come on that just is not worried. So many people worry about how they're going to say it or this or that. He just says exactly how he feels at that moment, and you capture it, and that's rare.
Yeah. He's got a big heart, and he's got an extreme intelligence, and just a super sense of humor, and a really unique way of seeing the world. I remember it was like November of 2000, and he called me up, and we were going through a really, a lot at that time period in building the company, and he goes, "I just want to let you know, we've reached the apex of Western civilization. It's all downhill from here." I was like, I don't want to hear that. And he was right. To be quite honest, I really do believe he is right in many respects. And he is a futurist, and he's able to really understand what's going on at a deeper level than most people do, and yet still keep his balance in the midst of everything that he sees.
Oh, I think he's probably right, too. I think back to some of that writing in the book, The Quiet American, where Graham Greene talks about telling the American advisors in the 50s, like, hey, you can come here and you can do your war, but 1,000 years from now, they're still going to be in those rice fields with those oxen plowing the fields. And so I think, some things that maybe we've grown up with will peak out and stuff, but I think other parts of society and culture will probably keep doing their thing for a long time to come.
Yeah, I do think he was thinking of the superpowers and that be at the time, and we're seeing in the United States right now some very scary fallout in our politics from some of the choices that we've made and where we've gone, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Well,
and I think that brings us into your work, your newest work, your Inner GPS, and I think maybe that's a good jumping off point because I have watched from afar some of what's going on CNN, and look, people can have different perspectives on different sides, but I think the choices we could talk about, but that's not really relevant. I think what's more relevant maybe is the population. The population seems to have, and this jumps right into your world, no clue what their inner GPS is in any way, shape, or form. And I'm talking about the mass of the bell curve. They just are out to lunch. I don't know what GPS they're working with, but it's not their inner one.
Well, this is interesting. What I've found is that everyone was born with a factory-installed guidance system that's located in their body that they can feel. And it's operating in relationship to what they're thinking. And what most people believe the sensations are, which is a constriction in the throat, chest, and stomach area. They call it stress, worry, fear, anxiety, overwhelm, frustration. Those are actually a closing sensation, I call it closing, in the body, which means what you're thinking is not true and out of alignment or not going to happen. And what's happening is because they have it backwards, it's kind of actually very counterintuitive when you begin to learn it. They're operating from their closing, which creates more stress. The more that you hold a thought that's not true, the deeper the sensation of closing gets, and the deeper the sensation of closing gets, most people believe that closing sensation is the truth. And then they begin trying to change their reality and their circumstances around them based on a truth that's actually, they're being guided that that's not the truth. And so the more that you operate into this closing sensation and don't understand how this works, the worse things get. And that's exactly what I believe is happening here in the U.S. The more they spin out of control, the more they believe that there's this massive danger coming, the worse things get. And I think that's why we see things like the experience at our conventions and the rioting and the Black Lives Matter anger and violence that's coming up. There's no solutions when you operate from the closing.
Give an example, perhaps, beyond politics, maybe something that would be good to illustrate the idea of the closing, because this is really the heart of the matter. And perhaps, and you can touch on this too, because I mean, look, I'm right now in a country that's 95% Buddhist. When I read your work, I'm feeling, and I look at your name. I don't know if there's a connection there, but but I feel that there's some influence here, and there's some. Am I going down the wrong path? No.
Buddhism, Taoism, both have strong leanings in talking about this opening sensation, this centeredness in the core of the body. For eons, Buddhists have been using meditation to separate and see the mind as a tool instead of an operating system, and trying to get people to move into that. And the more that you realize that there's a flow, and that flow is running through your body, and when you feel the opening sensation, which maybe we can give your listeners an example of that where they can feel it for themselves in a bit here, the more that you train your mind to follow the opening, the more you get into what the Buddhists talk about and what Taoists talk about as this flow of energy that's expansive and opening. And actually, it literally is, I call it feeling light, open, and wise. It's literally a flow that you can drop into. Athletes talk about it. I've interviewed several famous people who live from this already, and they're highly successful. It's a natural thing that they fell into and they follow. Yeah, I do believe that most wisdom traditions, even in Christianity, there's a lot of discussion of it. In the Bible, Judaism, there's a lot of discussion of this essence inside of ourselves that is present and available at all times.
I see the phrasing in your work, a subtle energy.
Yes, it is a subtle energy. The most interesting thing is that it's what I think in the future, this work will be equated to the same thing as understanding that you have thoughts or you have emotions. There was a time in history when somebody tried to explain a thought to someone else, like, that thing that happens up here in this upper head region before you take any action or you do anything, and people are like, what are you talking about? And I think that this work will be as known as a common part of our humanness as our thoughts and our emotions are. And that it's always in relationship to what we're thinking, not the outside situation, but our thinking about the outside situation. And by changing our thinking and finding this flow in the body, things open up and work out so fast in our lives that it feels like miracles are happening. And I like to say miracles are the norm, but it's really just all the way that nature's already operating. There's already a flow and synchronicity that's happening. We have the ability to tap into it at any moment.
So, for example, somebody is having any kind of problem, business, relationship, career, and day after day, they are fixated on some issue, some thought, and they just can't pass it through. They stay fixated on it, and it just continues, and it continues, and it continues. And that starts to be right where your work starts to rear its head and perhaps offer people a way around that. Because I look, we all do find ourselves in that trap, as one way to describe it. But it does seem like with things like social media and constant on lifestyles, it seems like this ability for us to fall into these, and you mentioned this with the politics already, but for our ability to fall into these traps is easier and easier and easier to do. And then to get out, we just lose perspective.
Yes. So let me, with some context around what's happening with the mind to start. In the United States, one of the examples I use is I ask my audiences, what color is a yield sign, the traffic yield sign? Do you have an answer for that one? You might know from my book, but...
Well, hold on. Let me go back in time in my head. I want to say it's red, but I can't recall.
It is red and white. However, 95% of my audiences say yellow and black.
You're going to send me a check? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, only if you have a picture that you send me one. What happens is literally 90 to 95% of my audiences will say yellow and black. A few people say red. What happens is that I let them know that back in 1971, the yield sign was changed to red and white, and it was completely gone out of the U.S. traffic system by 1974. People can look this up on Wikipedia. They still say yellow and black because in the first 5 to 7 years of their life, they saw a yellow and black yield sign. Their mind logged it as that's what color it is, and there's no operating system in the mind, so that when they pass a red and white one, they go, oh, the mind says, oh, hey, it's not yellow and black anymore, it's red and white. And and I hate to go back to people's childhood, but it's the absolute truth, most of what we believe and know as our existence happens between the ages of 0 and 7. And so we have things in there that were given to us by our parents, even down to like core level things like our emotions. In watching how our parents reacted to certain things, we learned that's how you react when somebody's late. That's how you react when somebody talks to you a certain way. This is how, and that's your emotional experience. And they're not true. I call them the yellow yield signs in the mind. They're not true, and they're things about money and our value. But even more so than that, this IGS finds the yellow yield signs that are there that no longer work, that are thoughts and belief systems that no longer work for us. And it actually, when you begin to learn to follow the opening and find the opening from the closing thoughts, what I'm finding in working with neuroscientists is that this nervous system begins to repattern and program the brain. It creates new neural pathways, and the old ones begin to fade and die. I've been doing this for 15 years, teaching it and studying it for 23. And just recently I've been coming into contact with people in the last 3 to 4 years in these fields that talk about neuroplasticity, how we can, using this system, as part of the studies that I'm involved in now, using this system on a daily basis throughout our day, reprogram our mind as we're going through our lives using their internal guidance system. That
neuroplasticity, I've had multiple guests on talking that concept. For example, a gentleman named Anders Ericsson, who is wrote a book called Peak, the 10,000 hour practice guy. He talks about this issue where it's like it's the mind is not this static, fixed piece of cells and whatnot. It is completely a muscle. Use it, lose it, retrain it. I mean, it is completely there to be used and put into a new direction. And if you, for example, Zen, walk into the room and say, hey, I've got a toolkit that will help your mind go in an entirely new direction. Plenty of people can say, hey, no way, there's no way, nothing can change. But the evidence is in, and you can change.
And not only can you change, you can change quickly. When you go back to the earlier question about people who have these, I call it being hijacked by your mind. They have these incessant thoughts that keep going on, and they feel the suffering in their body. They feel the pain of these thoughts, but yet they can't seem to find a way out. What I teach is practices that have you learn to not only find your way out, but find your way out in an instant. Within a matter of 30 seconds to 3 minutes, you can move your brain into a new domain, and it is 100% malleable.
Paint a picture of an example. Think of somebody that you encountered that you met them, you heard their story, they had that block, it was obvious to everybody except them, you gave them a tool quickly. Walk through an example where somebody can really add some color there in their understanding.
Yeah, I'm going to use myself. My father and I had a very challenging relationship. Lots of pain involved, and since I was a little kid. And I was on my way up about 26, 27, on my way to his house for Christmas, and thinking, I had an 8-hour drive to get there. I was thinking, what am I doing? It's just going to be miserable. I'm just going to cry. I don't even know why I go. And I have all this closing, and this is when I first started using this tool. And I was thinking, he doesn't love me. He loves my brother more. He doesn't even like me. And I'm like, whoa, I'm closed. Wait a minute. That means what I'm thinking is not true. These thoughts are old paradigm. But I have a lot of proof. I have a lot of proof of all these concepts that I have in my head, right? So my mind immediately argues, of course this is true. So I said, nope, I'm going to use this IGS tool. So I started thinking about it, and after going through, it took me quite a while to unravel it on my drive, and all of a sudden this thought hit me, just trying to examine other thoughts to find the opening. The thought that came through that gave me a huge expansion in my body was, he didn't know how to be a father to a girl. I had this huge opening, and all of a sudden, everything, it's almost as if, it's like one of those picture books, those cartoon books that you flip through that they draw on each page has a different image on it, and it looks like it's moving. It's almost as if the whole past flipped through and was rewritten, because I could totally see the situations that he and I had been in together from a new perspective. So not only did it completely change my belief system in the moment, it updated my reference point, and it gave me the next step that I needed to take. All I needed to do was have compassion and teach him how to be a great dad to a girl, to a woman. Help the guy out, for God's sakes. And over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, I repatterned our relationship, and we became incredibly close. And the actions that he was taking and the things that he would say I couldn't go back to the old closing paradigm anymore because it wasn't true. So the pain left. And that was years of suffering. I used to, within 20 minutes of walking in the house, he would say something that would have me in tears. And it was my mind telling me that what the meaning of his words were, and my IGS is internal guidance system for short. My IGS gave me a completely new mental space to put it in, and the suffering left. And we do this all the time. Another example, which really kind of goes back to the politics we have now. I was with a man, his name was Van Jones. I was coaching him between his nonprofit and joining the Green Jobs movement with Obama in the White House and his transition there. And we were sitting there in our fourth coaching session. He said, I can't really go further unless I tell you something. And he said, it's probably going to upset you, and I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I need to talk to you about it. And I said, okay. And he said, you're a racist. Now, immediately my mind said, no, I'm not. I wasn't raised that way. And my IGS closed. When you close, that means what you're thinking is not true. So I was like, wait a minute. I closed. That means I am a racist. And I opened. So I said, I just closed, and I explained it to him, and he said, and he explained it. I said, tell me, what do you mean by this? Because I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't raised with any hostility. I have friends. I don't understand. And he explained to me the cultural paradigm and the stereotypes that I held and the limitations I put on people and the expectations that I had of how they would behave and how it's just a saturation point that happens because of everything. Our media and everything that we see and hear creates this racist mindset that we don't even see. And so anyways, from there, I was able to shift and start growing and learning, and it was a very profound conversation for me. But we have things that we close to, and we don't realize that that means that what we're thinking isn't true, and we begin to operate and fight. I mean, think about relationships that you've been in, where you're sitting there across the living room from a person going, I know that you're doing this. And the person's going, I'm not doing that to you. That's not what I'm thinking. That's not how I'm feeling. And you can't, and for some reason you'll keep the argument going, and even if they try to convince you, you can't believe that your mind, the way your mind is thinking about them in the moment, isn't true. So this is an access point.
Let me add something to the Van Jones comment. I caught a 30-minute interview with him recently. He was at I think he was at the Republican convention. He was at both conventions, but I think it was at the Republican convention. He was approached by a group of guys on the street, and they represented a kind of libertarian-leaning radio program. And they kind of threw some hot buttons at him really quick, and he was just on the street by himself. And anyways, it turned into being a 30-minute conversation. And for anybody that watches it, regardless of what your political persuasion might be, you end up walking away saying, I could have a beer with Van Jones. He was practical. He was down to earth. He might have a different opinion than me, whatever, da-da-da-da. And so it was really interesting. I then posted this on Facebook, and immediately I had several comments that were from people on the far right. They're welcome to this view, but they immediately didn't even want to hear what I had to say because in their mind, they already had him labeled as something. So the new information was not going to be allowed in at all.
Yes. And that's the polarity that's happening all over the world, actually, not just in the United States. That is keeping us from solutions. Like I said, from the closing, and that's the thing is they hear something, they close, and they believe that the closing means they're right. That's the current paradigm. That's not true. That's so dangerous, and it's leading people away in their finances, away from being able to have abundance. It's leading people away from beautiful relationships. It's leading people away from solutions in their businesses that they can't see. I work with executives all the time in coaching. Part of what we do is just unravel the deep-seated beliefs and limitations they have so that they can actually get to the next level with ease of where they're going. And they don't even see them. It's like fish in water. They don't even realize that they've created these limitations. It cannot be this way. It cannot be that way. I won't have it this way. I don't want this. And when they say it, they're closed, which means that's not true. So yes, it's a shame that I can't wait for people to be really getting into and using this tool because the level of joy, happiness, wisdom, discernment, creativity that comes, that's fresh and new, it's almost as if people have talked to me and said, I'm almost a different person. And it's a person I love and I like, and I know what to do in situations. I know what choices to make for myself. I know I'm only a few minutes from opening in any moment, and it's just a matter of, it's like a little alarm bell. I just closed.
The no drama toolkit.
Yes.
Drama makes me just, when I see drama walk in the room, or if I happen to have engineered it that day, but when I see drama walk in the room, I'm just like, oh man, please, here it comes. I mean, most people don't know they're walking in with it.
No, they don't. And the other thing is like what I've found working with thousands and thousands of people is that people are already using this in some areas of their life, and those areas of their life, there's no drama and it's going well. And then there's other areas, whether it's going home for Christmas or Hanukkah, or, they're great until they're in a relationship with someone else, or good until they start their business. They have areas that are broken down, and it evens that all out. So that your whole life, you begin to master your whole life, and just instead of just some areas. Maybe it's parenting that they're a disaster in, and it's the belief systems that are destroying their relationships with their kids and their capacity to be able to be a really good parent. This works on all levels, and the funny part is, this is a joke, but it's true. The funny thing, I should say, but it's true. This is good for little things. Like, I use it to look at what side of the sheet is longer as I'm pulling the sheet out to go put it on. I check in with my IGS so that I don't have to go through unmaking the bed and turning it around again. Going to the post office, what to eat, health, judging doctors, practitioners, how much I charge, all of it. How to create my schedule, and the big giant belief systems around building a business and my parenting skills and my relationship with my husband and my dearest people in my life.
Let me dig a little bit deeper here on some of the behind the scenes going on. Why don't you, for the audience, you've talked about some definitions, but why don't you explain and give some perspective where this guidance is coming from? If people don't necessarily have an understanding, perhaps they might, and I'm sure you occasionally get this, they might say, well, my gosh, this lady's up in San Francisco. This sounds a little Haight-Ashbury, a little new age. I'm not sure this is for me. They don't want to dive deeper. Talk about where the guidance comes from.
I'm actually, even though my name is Zen and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm actually a very practical person. I'm a systems thinker. I came out of technology, and my degree's in foreign policy and Mandarin Chinese, and I'm actually way more right than I am left. I'm say all that because the guidance seems to be coming from a source that's outside of what we know. It's outside of space and time. You can go back and unravel things that are in the past, and it also knows things about the future. I don't usually, name it, because I believe that when people get into relationship with this part of themselves, they discover what it is for them, right? And there's non-denominational. It doesn't matter whether you're from atheist, to being abducted by aliens.
Hold on, that was mine. Seriously, I've been multiple times. So anyways, continue.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter where you fall in that scale, Buddhist, Judaism, and Christianity, people have named it the Holy Spirit. It has wisdom and information that the human mind can't know. So not only is it working with our own brain and our own belief systems, each person's internal guidance system is tuned in to what I truly believe and have come to watch and see happen, their destiny, their purpose in life. And its goal is to use this wider wisdom base, whether you can call it instinct, God, Holy Spirit, prana for some people who follow the yogic expression. And it's trying to help you use your mind to move into the direction of your optimal life. And in that, it gives you information. It closes with about things that you couldn't possibly know. I was listening to a guy who owns a really famous bar company, and he was, a nutritional bar, right? And he was talking about he was about to sell the company. He was tired of running the company the way he was running it. He was going to get, $45 million for the sale, sitting at his office, and he was just closed. He just had this anxiety feeling inside as he's about to sign this paperwork. So he went for a walk, and as he's walking, he thinks, what if I'm all wrong? What if I'm supposed to keep this company? He said he got this massive expansion. He talks about this in his TED Talk. It's the guy who owns the Cliff Bar company. He talks about it in his TED Talk. He gets this massive expansion at the thought of keeping the company, and he realizes he can't sell. And he said it was the best thing they ever did, following that energy. How would he have known that? He's sitting there at his desk, tired, burnout, ready to cash out. $45 million sounds really great, right? Yet it wasn't his right move. I'll give you a little story. Can I give you my airport story?
Absolutely.
So this is an example of not knowing, right? So a friend and I were at the airport, in Denver, and we're waiting for our flight, and the airport weather gets really bad, and they start shutting down the airport, and they say all flights are canceled, and you've got to go back. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Denver airport, but it's a long way back to Denver. It's not like you walk out and get a hotel. And so we're leaving the airport. We're on our way out, and I'm closed as I'm thinking about the strategy of like I got a course tomorrow I have to cancel, and how am I going to get home? And we need to get this. And I'm like, I'm closed. Wait a minute. That means everything I'm thinking right now is not true, not in alignment. So I turned to my friend who also uses his IGS, and I said, "Are you closed about leaving the airport?" He goes, "Yes, I'm very closed right now." And I said, "Well, let's hold the thought of that. We're supposed to stay here in the airport." And he goes, "Yeah, it opens me." I'm like, "All right." So we turn around, we head back down into the terminal to our gate, and the woman there goes, "What are you guys doing back?" And we explained, "I have this thing called the IGS." And she laughed and she goes, "I wouldn't follow that right now." And I was like, "Well, I have to. I have to walk my talk." So she goes, "Well, everything's going to shut down. There's not going to be any services. There's just going to be maintenance and security here. You know, you're going to end up spending the night, which you're welcome to do, but it's very uncomfortable." I said, "We have to." So about 4 hours later, and 6 people trying to convince us we should leave, I'm sitting there thinking, maybe I should have left. It's like 2 a.m. In walks a flight crew. Not only did the flight crew walk in, they just happened to be going to San Francisco where we needed to be. We were the only 2 people on the plane. They had to get the plane from Denver in this opening to try and keep some of the schedules the next day that plane needed to carry, and so they brought these people in because they knew there was a clearing. How did my IGS know that? And that's one of thousands of stories that I have of people who've used their IGS, and there was absolutely no way. One woman was booking a flight, and she wanted to see her family, and she was going to go before this trip. She was going to put it, bookend it, and she kept closing. And then finally she thought, well, maybe I could go after, and she opened. And her dad ended up having, a surgery. There's lots of airport stories. It's kind of funny how that works, that she would have never been able to know about 3 months before, and she was able to get there and be there for the family.
Let me share one with you really quick, and I want your analysis on it because I think it's right in the headspace. So I mentioned I'm in Asia. So I was living in San Diego in 2012. I started a podcast. It was mostly talking to traders like Brad. Then I started morphing into other areas. I talked to Dan Ariely and Daniel Kahneman and all these various people. I started practicing yoga in 2012. And about 6 months into my podcast, this guy from Tokyo writes me and he says, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast. I love when you talk about yoga, da-da-da-da." He goes, my friend runs this branch of a bank in Tokyo. He'd like you to come speak at one of their events. I had spoke for this firm 5 or 6 years ago. I said, sure, I'll come out there. He connects me with the guy. The guy calls me and he says, "Hey, where are you flying from? Let's book everything and da-da-da-da-da." And I said, at that moment, the true answer would be, I'm flying from San Diego to Tokyo. And I said to him, well, I'm going to already be in Asia.
Wow.
That's what I say to him. And he says to me, "Oh, really? You're already going to be in Asia? Would you like to speak for us in Beijing, Shanghai, Singapore, KL?" And just runs off this. And he goes, "We'll pay you the same as we're going to pay you in Tokyo."
Wow. That's fantastic. And there's just some part right that knew.
Right? I knew I was going to be in Asia. I didn't necessarily know that he was going to do that.
No.
I had no clue.
Agree. I have so many extraordinary business stories that are just like that by following my IGS.
And there's a certain flow to that. That's just basically saying, oh yes, I'm living in San Diego, I have friends there, da 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 da, and I go to Asia. I don't even know people. I know a few people, but where am I going to live? What am I doing? I didn't ponder any of it. I was just like, okay, let's go.
Yep, it's exactly how it works. Of course, the sensational stories. And here's a good one that actually I think will give. And I just talked to, and this is a woman I talked to on Coast to Coast AM. I don't know if you know the show. A lot of late night people do here in the U.S.
Absolutely, a lot of aliens on there.
Yes, there is. And they booked me to talk about this a couple months back. And this woman got on for coaching, and she says, "Can you help me unravel what happened to me?" And I said, "Sure, I'll try." She said she was on a trip that was like one of these outdoor trips that are really tough to test your endurance and your emotional fortitude and strength. And she's on the trip. She kept getting the feeling like she needed to leave, like she needed to walk out and leave. And she said, and I'm talking, and she goes, and so finally she does. But she was sick to her stomach the whole time. And that's part of the IGS closing. She was sick to her stomach. She was stressed out and everything. And she kept going, and she finally they told her how to get out. She gets out. And 2 days later, she talks to they're supposed to be back, and she goes to talk to the people, and they go, "How did you know?" Now, she was closed. So that would lead her to think that her wanting to leave was not true, she shouldn't have left, according to the closing. But she had this intuitive hit. So it turns out that a freak storm came in, and everybody had to be helicoptered out and had frostbite and were totally sick and had all these major, major things happen to the entire group that she completely missed. And she goes, "So isn't that the opposite of what you're saying with your IGS?" And I said, "Well, let me ask you this. The whole time were you trying to talk yourself into staying? You had an intuitive hit that you needed to get out of there. But what were your thoughts? Were you thinking the whole time, I got to stick this out, I paid for this, I can't leave? Were you trying to talk yourself out of leaving?" And she goes, "Yes, the whole time. I had to override all of that." I said, "All those thoughts about trying to make yourself stay were closing, which means they weren't true." And I said, "And then when you left, did you kick yourself until you heard, keep those thoughts were continued in your brain about how I shouldn't have left and I'm weak or whatever they were for you, about being inept and, a loser or whatever, until you heard that there was an accident?" She goes, "Yes, I was torturing myself. I felt like such a flake." And or whatever. I mean, she says it on the radio show. I said, "Yes." And she goes, "I am so open right now. You're right. My intuition told me to leave, and my brain tried to keep me there." I've worked with lots of traders in this industry, actually, in what I do, because it's a constant battle between your gut and your head when you're doing that work and trying to suss out. And no matter what strategy you have or what formula you have, your mind will, as something's going up or down, it'll try to convince you that it knows what's right, but your IGS is gauging all whole time. It stops the doubt. It has you stay when you should. It has you get out when things look like you shouldn't get out, and it's time to go. And I've worked, the reason why I think this works so well with traders that I've worked with is because it stops that kicking yourself after mentality, because you had a feeling like you knew you should stay, but your mind was telling you you're crazy, or go and your mind was telling you you're crazy because you're on the ride up. Our minds are constantly giving us input that isn't necessarily true. It's only working off a paradigm of the 0 to 7 years of age and trying to keep us safe, and it doesn't have real-time information. But this internal guidance system somehow, I think it's tapped into God and nature and all it is. It actually does have the information and is working with us to solve these temperamental mind issues that we have.
The flow is clearly not necessarily a straight line. And I think so many people get caught up in the idea of making a decision. They think more about making the decision versus just making the decision. And if you make the decision and it perhaps doesn't go exactly in the right direction of flow, you can make another decision.
Michael, that's so brilliant. That's exactly what it is. It's giving you information based on what you're thinking, and it will get you there the best way possible. And sometimes it's what I call the breadcrumb approach. It'll get you to make a decision, and then new things occur, and then all of a sudden it may be that decision closes you, and you have to make a new decision. And it's like this breadcrumb approach that seems very hodgepodge, but but it really it's getting you to where you need to be any way that it can in using your thoughts. And it does look like you make a decision and you wait and see how your IGS responds, and then you have to make a new decision.
I'll throw another example out in my life. I've done a handful of books, and I started working on a new one in 2013. And I did all the research, and I stayed in the same way that I was for this 5-year period where I knocked out like 4 of them. And I just was kind of like, just knock it out. And just a very typical type of finance, trading books, whatnot. And I did all this research in 2013, and I wanted to force myself to start writing, but I couldn't. I just didn't feel it. And then I just found myself doing more research over 13, more research over 14, more research over 2015. And all of a sudden, within 3 years, instead of relying on paradigms and information and pieces of knowledge that I had assembled over the last 15 years, I found myself with a whole new toolkit. But it is because instead of in this writing world, you get such a push from people, just knock something out, get the next thing out there. But I don't really care about that anymore. I just want to do what I want to do. I want to do what I'm feeling. I want to do what I know I should put out there right now as my best work. And if that takes 3, 4, 5 years to get out, that's fine. I don't care anymore about all the other stuff that might exist. That's kind of perhaps an experienced bit of wisdom. As a first time, I know you're not, as a first time author, for people out there that might be a first time author, they can't necessarily think like that, but maybe they should.
Yeah, no, but it's true. I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. In sessions that I do with people, one of the big things that comes up is healing grief that they have over past decisions. Like starting an education route and then feeling like it wasn't right for them and dropping out and never being able to really sit right with that decision. Another person that I worked with was a part of almost $1 billion company, pretty close. He had made the decision to get out right before it really went big, which would consider big. And he still got a good amount of money from it, but nothing like the other people that had started with him, right? They're flying in private jets and he's still taking first class, right? Kind of a thing. And it was like 20 years later, and he still, when he came to me, was like, this still causes me pain that I blew it, that I got out early, that I made the wrong decision, that I should have stayed in. In checking in, I said, well, let's check with your ideas. Let's throw some opening thoughts in there and see throw thoughts in there and see what opens you. And I said, well, the first thing is are you happily married and have a great family? He goes, yes, actually. My marriage is great. We've been married for over 30 years, and my kids are wonderful. And I said, okay, I just want to ask, of all of your buddies who stayed in and are wealthy, which one is happily married for 30 years? And he goes, they all divorced. And they're all completely disenfranchised from their kids. And actually, they're fat and they're alcoholics. And he goes, I get it. I said, yeah, so let's just look at it for a second. Would you trade that? He goes, no, you're right. None of them are happy. I was just looking at the money. And he said, it was just gone. He's like, it totally opened him that it was the right decision and that his family would have been hurt by him staying in that company any longer. And he said, the reason I got out was because the ethics. There was some integrity stuff going on that I couldn't sit with anymore. And you're right. My wife and I were fighting at the time that I decided to get out. We were fighting over the decisions the company was making that I didn't agree with.
Building on that, which is a great example because so many people really, you see the headlines today and, for example, I can think of Peter Thiel. He makes a $5 million investment in Facebook and it turns into, $1 billion or something. People see these small amounts of money becoming huge. And that acceleration is definitely new for our current day lives. Starting with the dot-com bubble, but and I think that really messes people up with perspective because you say, my gosh, and I, like you, I know plenty of people that have, not plenty, but I know a lot of people that have made over $1 billion. And if you allow yourself to think, well, if not, it could be me, or there's so much luck involved with $1 billion or $5 billion or Mark Zuckerberg's $35 billion. And life is short. If you go through life trying to only get $1 billion, the chances are, given the sum total of the population of this world, you're never going to get there.
The other thing that's really key to that is it's not in everybody's purpose and destiny to be a billionaire. We all have our levels of perfect abundance, which a lot of people get trapped in, this is what it has to be and then I'll be happy. Then I'll be successful. The sum total of our lives is so much bigger and broader than that there's happiness right here. And I'm not talking about not being abundant and not being prosperous. I'm not talking about that. But I've worked with so many people that they never got to the enough, and so they never, even when you get up to that level, right, they never get to enough, and they just never actually get happy or satisfied.
And then you die.
Exactly.
And it's over.
Exactly. And so what's interesting is being able to be led in using the flow to where it's perfect for you, and you have all of this other richness in your life.
It's such a nice perspective because I've been thinking about it a lot recently. A lot of young people are always talking to us, but to bring up the example of the guy that was lamenting that he didn't stay on board for the ride. And he didn't capture the ride like everyone else. And if not, but, and what you did, reframing it so he can see, hold on, Do I really want that? I mean, I know people in my life right now, I can look at them. They are smoking, they are drinking, they are unhealthy as you know what. They're probably going to be dead at 55 and they're making a lot of money. And you're like, okay, I don't want that. I mean, look, I'll be very base about this. If you are that guy, and let's just use a heterosexual example, if you are a heterosexual male and you are that guy, guess what? Any normal female, you might find some women that will go along for the ride, for the wealth and the power and da-da-da-da-da, but you're never going to experience what's possible. You know where I'm going with that. Yes.
Yeah, which is one of the greatest joys in life is being in a relationship with a significant other who's extraordinary. You know what I mean? I agree. In the other pieces is that when the focus is all on one thing and that's not really your purpose, that's not really what your whole life is intended to be about, you're closed a lot of the time, and that's when the drinking and the smoking come in. You're trying to find the relief from that feeling of anxiety and stress and frustration and overwhelm, and that's when those things come into play. I believe that it's not just one life's purpose. I believe we have thousands of life's purposes, from giving a book to somebody who you just have this feeling like you need to do it, to smiling at the clerk in front of you, to raising amazing children and having a beautiful relationship with them. There's all these little ways in which we are to be entwined in a really healthy, prosperous way with all kinds of attributes of our lives and other people. And that's where fulfillment comes from. That's where real true fulfillment, I believe, comes from giving and contributing. It really is about a depth of contribution where you go to bed and you feel like you did something amazing today. That's the feeling that you don't necessarily get when you're so single-focused on one particular line item that you need to have in order to be happy before you can contribute. The contribution comes all along the way.
One of my life's purposes, and you might chuckle at this, perhaps not, one of my life's purposes is to continue to be, and the age will change, but at this moment in time, to continue to be a 47-year-old male that can do the full splits. That is part of my life's purpose.
Yes, I don't laugh at that at all. That's the other piece
and I can, by the way, I can. So I'm not. It's not a goal. I can.
Yeah, well, I'm 45. So. I can't do the splits, but almost. I'm pretty close. But the good thing about using the IGS is, can we go into health for a minute, since you brought it up?
Sure.
I don't want to get woo-woo on people, but there's a exercise on my website that people can do to feel this for themselves. You can feel it instantly. It's very simple. When the constriction happens, it feels like a tightening in the center of the body from the throat to the upper solar plex area. And when the opening happens, it feels like an expansion. Literally like you have more breath, you have more physical energy. And like I said, stress, worry, fear, anxiety, frustration, overwhelm, anytime you're feeling that, you're closed. That means what you're thinking is not true or not going to happen. It's out of alignment. But that closing is like, let's just take stress, for instance. Stress is in the top 5 leading disease-related deaths. It's in the top 5 elements as the cause of the disease. And literally, when your body is closed, there is less life force energy flowing to your cells, to your brain, to your heart, and that's when disease begins to occur. And when you find this opening, and neutral is also is part of it, it works kind of like the hot-cold game when you're a kid. You blindfold yourself and you wander around trying to find an object and everybody tries to help you. Hot, hot, hot. No, you're going colder, colder. That's kind of how this works. When you're open, you have more energy and you are healthier. You begin to youth. That's what I call it, youthing. You literally begin to turn back the clock because you're filling your body with energy. And they're finding this time and time again by watching people with EEG doing meditation and different things, and the way that the cells are being fueled completely changes. So you're right on track.
There's no doubt about this. And I shifted into yoga, as I said, about 4 years ago, and I do other things too. But yoga is something that is, I don't want to get all woo-woo here, but yoga is something, even if you put aside the mental side and the spiritual side for many, if you just look at the physical side and what it does to the body, there is no, I don't know anything that compares. It's not my only thing I'll do for exercise, but it is, I cannot not do it. And for example, today I won't be able to do it, and I'm already feeling like, oh man, I am frustrated that I won't be able to do it today.
Yes. Well, that frustration is closing, which means it's perfectly okay. But yes, it does. Yoga is addictive too. I think for me it is. I think that's kind of what being able to have that feeling in your body after doing a really good yoga session, and the mental clarity and the relaxed state of beingness.
100 times better than any drunk or drug that people put in their system.
That's right. Yeah.
1,000,000 times better.
Yes.
Okay, listen, Zen, I've kept you for too long. Where can we send everybody? Your Inner GPS is available everywhere right now?
It is. It's available everywhere. In fact, I'm really loving you're in Asia because it's going to be out in Japan, in March. And then I don't have the month date, but we're going to be coming to doing it. It'll be in Mandarin and Cantonese shortly after that in 2017. But they can find it on Amazon in English at any time, and there's in bookstores in the United States. It's available. And then what I recommend is I have a free video tutorial that'll get people. I call it Jumpstart Your Inner GPS. It's at zeninamoment.com, zeninamoment.com. And there's a 4-minute video on the homepage right there that walks you through a little exercise that has you actually be able to feel it. So if you're doubting this and you're saying no way, not me, just go check it out and see if you feel it for yourself. Sign up for the free Jumpstart Your Inner GPS, and it's a small video series that will get you using it today. Like literally, you'll get the first exercise and you can go practice it right now and see what happens, because it's unbelievable.
Well, Zen, I think you have definitely inspired. You've inspired me. I'm going to go check it out for sure. Listen, I appreciate you taking some time today. I think I could see how this conversation would go if we talked for about 5 or 6, 7 hours. I would probably be laying on my couch sipping wine here in the not too distant future. Like, I mean, seriously, I would really go into some different kind of state. And then all of a sudden people would be like, hold on, does he know he's still being recorded? What is he even talking about? Right?
I will take you up on that live sometime when I'm in Asia, because I will be traveling over there most of next year. And so I will see if we can find a way to hook up somewhere in Asia and do just that.
Sounds good, Zen. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really loved it.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.